Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF, and Hebrew name is Bitronistim. It's a great pleasure today to be joined by Yifa Segal, who is the Managing Director of Hetz for Israel, a nonprofit that connects world leaders, policymakers, opinion leaders, and change makers to influence the world for good and to advance Israel's national security. She's a research fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and head of the Segal law firm, Law and Strategy. Yifa is formerly chief of staff for Israel's ambassador to the U.S., and she's the founder and former CEO of the International Legal Forum, a proactive legal hub for lawyers, organizations, and activists from all over the world fighting against terror, anti-Semitism, and the delegitimization of Israel and the Jewish people. Yifa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here again with you guys, Moshe. Hi.
We have a lot to discuss. First, let's just jump right into your reaction on this whole ceasefire deal and Hamas's reaction and their decision.
Yeah, so look, I mean, regardless of what anyone might think of whether it's a good idea or not to even have a deal with Hamas. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they're playing with us from the start. They're stringing us along, and so unfortunately, and I know a lot of people didn't want to be right about this, but unfortunately, we've seen them, just trying to postpone and postpone again until eventually it's pretty clear that the answer to even what the American administration called a very, very generous offer by Israel was rejected by Hamas. And so we are now many, many weeks into, the a stagnation of the war in Gaza. And so our soldiers are there, but they're not really advancing on a strategic level, just on a local tactical level. And we're suffering losses. We're suffering losses, casualties on the ground, but also on the international stage. And I think it's pretty clear at this moment in time that we should not allow Hamas to get what they want, which is to postpone, because they realize that time for us costs a lot more than it does for them. And just start the operation in Rafah as soon as possible, and put all the pressure on Hamas to maybe eventually they will have no choice but to agree to a much, much, much better deal in terms of Israeli interests.
Do you think at the end of the day, we should be pursuing that better deal? Or is there a point where we say no more deals, regardless of quote unquote how good they are, and just pursue a military offensive to the end?
I think I think that should be a combination of the two. I think absolutely we should definitely just go into Rafah. The operation there shouldn't be too long. It's just a few weeks. And that's the last stronghold of Hamas in Gaza. So I'm sure they'll come back begging once they really have nowhere else to fall back to. It's their last stronghold, geographically as well as strategically. So any deal when you have an opponent that has their back to the wall, rather than how they feel right now that we have our back to the wall, which is ridiculous, but it's actually how all the cards were played here. I think you can get a better deal. So, I don't want to speak in hypotheticals. And everyone's trying to force Israel to speak, to say hypothetically, what is the best deal you're willing to offer, even though there's nothing on the other side and you're just negotiating with yourself and you keep negotiating yourself down. So no, let's continue the operation, put their backs against the wall, and then see what's on the table, and then make a decision, and not just negotiate with ourselves anymore.
So since the end of February, and I asked this question to General Avivi yesterday, so no pressure, but since the end of February, we've been discussing a deal with Hamas, and it's like Groundhog Day. We keep coming back to the same discussion of a deal, no deal, yes deal, no deal. So now that Hamas is saying no to this deal, what's going to move us along to say, okay, let's start the offensive, or is the government going to wait for another deal to come about?
I don't know what the government is going to do. I mean, I'm sure the pressure coming from the U.S. administration is the most significant factor in why we haven't went into Rafah yet. I'm very hopeful, and look, I have the experience in sitting in these in these rooms, in these closed sessions, and to know that sometimes there's a world of difference between what is being conveyed in the media to what was actually said in those meetings. So let's all of us just keep a little bit of humility in just acknowledging that we're not in those rooms and we don't know. And but I hope that this was like all that was needed to really push the Americans to the understanding that we're going to go ahead whether you like it or not. I mean, we've given it all the chances in the world, much more than was even reasonable to ask of Israel. And every second that we waste is a second that we are, again, we're losing on our strategic interests in Gaza, but also around the world. So I think the sooner the better. I'm hoping while we're talking, and I can't check the news because I'm in here talking to you. There's breaking news about entrance to Rafah. That's how badly I think it should happen.
Let's both hope that happens, and we finish this briefing and we see good news. I want to discuss a little bit broader the ICC. Can you please share with our audience what is happening in the ICC? Let's just start with the basics. Who is the ICC and what are they doing right now for Israel?
What they're doing is never for Israel, I can assure you that. So the International Criminal Court was established in the early 2000s, and this was an idea actually that was initiated by Jews after World War II and modeled after the Nuremberg trials. The Jews of the world, including in Israel, thought that if only we had an international tribunal that would deter world leaders from committing these heinous crimes, such as those that the Nazis committed against Jews and other populations across Europe, then maybe there's an international system of justice to prevent, but B, if something happens, then it can, together as one entity, advancing justice, we can go after these, horrible people, horrible leaders. But what happened with the International Criminal Court is very, very far from that beautiful vision that I just described to you, that everyone kind of fantasized about. It went to become much like every other UN entity, just a political entity that is busy pursuing mostly political agendas that are ordered or given down by the states that sends these judges. And it's very clear, the structure. The structure is according to member states, and it's very different to any other let's say UN entity. And so it's no surprise that Israel is such a unique victim of this international organ, in terms of the fact that we are the only democracy that was ever pursued this way, and every interpretation of international law and every precedent of international law was completely twisted and turned by this institution to justify continuing the prosecution of Israel in seeking to advance political agendas, as we said in the beginning. So where we are now is basically, the court, like everyone else in the world, have become even more interested in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians since October 7th. Unfortunately, their interest is not really going in the right direction. It's not about being interested in the people who went deliberately to plan how they massacre, torture, mutilate, rape, and kidnap innocent women, children, babies, and elderlies, but more as an opportunity to kind of go after the only democracy in the Middle East. And again, that's who we are in the center of all this mess, Israel. So we don't even know. I mean, there are a lot of rumors about this might be going forward. Maybe there will be arrest warrants against Israeli officials waiting. This is something that can happen without publication. This can be very secret, the issuing of arrest warrants. I mean, this is something that you might only find out about hypothetically if one of those people that have arrest warrants against, standing arrest warrants, would land in a country that is a member of the ICC, and then they would be obligated to honor the arrest warrants and to do something about this Israeli official that has landed on in their territory. And so there's been a lot of rumors. We also seen the Americans, the administration commenting about this in a very harsh way, criticizing the ICC, warning the ICC, using very harsh language. We've seen other countries. We've seen other countries standing up for us on this particular issue in the past, and I think it's different because there are a lot of countries that are afraid of once you misinterpret and create a new precedent and kind of abuse international law, then you create a new precedent that can come back and haunt, these other democratic leaders. And so I think this is why it's important to them more than you see involvement of these leaders in this case, particularly more than you'd see on other things. So I don't really know what to tell you. We're all waiting to see what if at all the ICC will do about this in the upcoming days or weeks. But that's where we are more or less.
And the United States, are they a member of the ICC? Would travel by the prime minister or the defense minister to the US be at all impacted by any results of the ICC arrest warrants?
Well, first of all, no. The United States of America is not a member of the ICC, and they're not a member of the ICC because of what I described. I mean, the Americans, both parties, by the way, throughout the years have been very clear about why they would not join as members to the ICC. So it would not be a direct threat for any Israeli to land in America. But I mean, don't forget, this is another major hurdle for us in terms of international delegitimization, even for an American administration, to continue to sell arms and to provide support and this amazing alliance that we had. This would create problems even for our relationship with the United States, definitely for other countries that are, let's say, weaker in their resolve to deal with allegations and to stand for justice. And so, yeah, this is a strategic problem, potentially.
And is it clear which member country is pushing these claims at the ICC, and to the extent to which Israel can then retaliate accordingly?
Well, first of all, you have South Africa, and we've seen also the proceedings that were launched against Israel in the ICJ. And I don't know if you follow these things, but Nicaragua, which is a country I don't think most people even heard of in Latin America, has filed proceedings against Germany for their assistance to Israel regarding the war in Gaza. So you see, this is like the most interesting thing that has ever happened in the history of the world. All the countries of the world are so interested in this little conflict in Gaza that is just unbelievable. But there are countries. I mean, we heard from Colombia that Colombia has threatened to sever diplomatic ties with Israel because of the the war in Gaza. Argentina, Brazil now is a big problem. Anyway, unfortunately, I mean, that China and Russia are big problems for Israel now because of their anti-Western agenda that is becoming more and more above surface, let's say. I mean, the animosity and I think we are getting closer and closer to a new Cold War by the minute with those big powers. And we are, as always, the Jews are always the collateral damage. They always try to throw the Jews under the bus first, and then when they realize that didn't help, they try to figure out a different way to solve the problem, usually by a world war.
For sure. There are reports that the Palestinian Authority may have a direct hand in what's happening in the ICC, and then potentially Israel would freeze transfer of tax revenue. Are you able to share what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I wish that would be true, right? So, I mean, the Palestinian Authority has been working against Israel on the international stage since its establishment, has been working against what it was obligated not to do in the Oslo Accords since its establishment. So even their membership in the International Criminal Court or all other international organizations is a violation, a clear violation of the Oslo Accords. Not to mention, of course, all of their support for terrorism, the pay for slay, incitement to terrorism, all of that. It's all in violation of the Oslo Accords, and it's all in violation of the International Court. And it's all in violation, of course, of the Israeli interest, which is, I think, in my view, the most important thing. But also it goes against American interest and European interest, and anyone who wants to have, even if not peace, at least quiet here in the region. And yet they've allowed the Palestinian Authority to do this for so many years. So, even though we have a law that is very similar to the American Taylor Force Act that allows the Israeli government to freeze a portion of the tax revenue that we are collecting for the Palestinian, depending on how much money they pay for terrorists on each month or each year. But, that haven't happened yet. So I don't think we need to wait until yes or no, the ICC will come out against us in a more aggressive way. We already know that the Palestinian Authority has went to the ICC, pushed the ICC, filed complaints against Israel with the ICC, lied repeatedly, created blood libels and falsehoods time and time again, and yet we have done nothing to sanction it. And yes, I would like to see that happen sooner rather than later. But to answer your question, I mean, there is a political camp of the people who are terrified of the day that the Palestinian Authority will collapse. The people are terrified that, they don't know what will replace the Palestinian Authority. Nothing scares them more than a vacuum. Nothing scares them more than the alternative of Hamas rising to power in Judea and Samaria, in addition to their power in the Gaza Strip. And so even within the Israeli government and Israeli security apparatus, and of course in the American administration, you have those that recognize, or even with the Europeans, by the way, I've had many, many meetings with Europeans who said, we know they're the devil, but the devil sometimes is better than the alternatives. And so I have to tell you, that's not how I view the world at all. I mean, if there's a devil out there trying to kill you, then you should not be his life support. And yes, of course, if the Palestinian Authority collapses, it will be difficult, but we need to prepare for that. And I think it's better to have chaos in the short term and a possibility of some kind of a better future than to keep the status quo alive and to bring your own strategic problems, kind of to help sustain them with your own hands and your own money.
Do you think there would be a noted difference in the world of diplomacy if the PA collapses because of its own corruption, or it collapses because Israel made a very finite, clear decision to withhold funding? Would that affect how the world reacts to their collapse?
I know, I've heard people say that, but a spoiler alert for you. It doesn't matter why it happens. I mean, they will tell the story as if it's Israel's fault anyway. So, we might as well do what is best for our interest, because again, I mean, if you just look at the situation in Gaza, or look at any issue, look at domestic violence, right? Why is a Palestinian man beating his wife? Because of Israel. Okay, so just, why is there any issue in the world? I mean, they will tell you a whole story of why it's Israel's fault. So, okay.
Sure. I want to pause here for a moment just to share something important with all of our viewers. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. And in a week and a half or so from now, we have Israel Memorial Day here in Israel, Yom HaZikaron. And in honor of Yom HaZikaron, we here at IDSF are producing a film which will be shown on Yom HaZikaron in a very similar genre to the films we put out on Passover. And there's a unique opportunity for all of our viewers. If any of you would like to support, would like to sponsor this film, you are more than welcome and, of course, encouraged to do so. And I'm going to put a link in the chat right here how you can go about doing that. And we'll also send it out later today in the emails. Yifa, thank you for allowing me to give that temporary public service announcement. I want to cover a super important topic. Let's shift gears if we can and talk about the U.S. college campuses. What is going on there, and how does that relate to this war here in Israel?
Look, I think the what most people fail to understand before October 7th is that, you've seen some anti-Israel and some anti-Semitic activities on college campuses, but people thought it's a separate issue, it's a separate problem. They didn't realize that it's tip of the iceberg, that these vast networks of anti-Western, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, um, you know, controlled by either Iran on one hand or the Muslim Brotherhood on the other hand. And you have, of course, the networks of Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the PFLP. These are global networks. These are global problems. They've been working for decades, to create a network that spans from Africa all through the West and all the way to Asia. And so now when they kind of pull the trigger on that, it's not a shock. The intensity and the aggressiveness of what is going on now on American college campuses, but also all throughout the West, is a result of our blindness and neglect for decades, and their tenacious, determined efforts to get to a point where they have the capabilities of activating, thousands and then thousands of people within Western countries to kind of serve their purpose, their agenda, and their goals. And so now when the Iranians and of course Hamas and all their other affiliates around the world wants to preserve Hamas and wants to think this is an opportunity for them to really kind of, push Israel with its back against the wall. And so they're able to pull the trigger and create such mass demonstrations and some violent incidences. It's not a coincidence. And if you look at some of these videos, you see all these tents, right? All these tents that were built. And so I don't know if you go camping, Moshe, but I go camping a lot. And if you go to like a place where there's a lot of camps, then every person has like a different camp, different equipment, not with them. It's very clear that someone funded this. All of the equipment looks pretty much the same. All the tents looks the same. I mean, it's for those of us who have been following this, it's not a surprise. And so I really think that we need to start understanding that the problem is not localized. It's global. And it's time to treat it that way. Gloves off and fight back.
We are frequent campers, and even with my own family, we all have different tents. So yeah, there's no doubt that picture of all those green tents was very telling. But tell me, what is the goal? Is the goal to just bring chaos to U.S. college campuses? Is the goal to bubble up to the administration? What are they trying to accomplish?
Well, I think they're trying to accomplish several things. First of all, they're trying to to weaken Israel's position to fight, whether it's in Gaza or against Hezbollah or against Iran. So the administration, of course, is vulnerable to public opinion, like any democratic government in the world, and of course during election year. And this is causing a real problem. And so if when we started our conversation, we asked, why isn't Israel going into Rafah? I mean, it's so obvious. We've talked about it for weeks. And so I think that it's naive to think that everything that is happening on the streets of America, is unrelated to the fact that the administration is pushing Israel so hard to avoid entering Rafah. So that's one thing. Second thing is now there's an opportunity to gather a lot of more support, popular support, within, not just Americans, by the way. We see it in other countries as well, but we're talking about America. I mean, this is popular now. I don't know if you've seen these videos about, these guys coming in and saying, I don't even know what this is about. I just know all the good guys are here, or all the hot chicks, whatever, depends on who you're talking to. But it's cool. It's where all the good guys are. So this is, they've created a trend now that is really, really spreading like wildfire. And the third thing, by the way, is deter the American administration and other governments from thinking about doing something against either Islamic communities or Islamic rivals across the Middle East. And I think that message was heard loud and clear, and that's something that we should all be very scared of what, within those closed rooms inside governments, what is the lesson that was learned from this? And if we talked about in the past about the possibility of acting against Iran, right? Because we all understand who Iran is. We just saw it like a couple of Saturdays ago. What is the probability of anyone acting directly against Iran when this is what you have in the streets of all of your cities across the West? Well, probability now is I believe is less and less, because we've seen their power.
Yifa, we only have a few minutes, so final question, and thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all of this with us. You have a tremendous amount of experience in fighting anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel. So what would you tell all of our viewers, most of whom are located in North America, Canada, Australia? How would you advise that they react to all of this unrest on college campuses? Should they go out there and counter-protest? Or should they do something a little more quiet to hope that it doesn't make the headlines of the newspapers? What's the best strategy?
Well, I think it's time to take all the gloves off. I mean, I that's it. I never thought that we should be quiet, by the way. But if ever was a time to stand tall and stand together and try to find ways to really create big coalitions, I think it's an opportunity, as well as a very scary time in Jewish history. It's also an opportunity. We need to reclaim our Jewish identity, our Jewish unity, our Jewish strength. It's an opportunity. So I think, first of all you Jewish donors out there, divest your money from all these universities and put the money into universities that doesn't allow for this type of craziness to take place on college campuses. Second of all, it's time for organizations to leave their egos aside, work together, show up together, come by the thousands. I mean, it's time for you, Jewish creativity, for Jewish unity. Gloves off. Let's fight the good fight and win.
If I couldn't agree with you more, thank you so much for sharing that with all of our viewers. It's a great pleasure to have you here today. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you next week, Monday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much.